So Matthew Johnson, this topic here, 5 major changes in drones that will change everything. Matthew Johnson here is the owner of M3 Aerial Productions. And Matthew here is the president and CEO of M3 Aerial Productions, Inc., and has been involved with the company since he founded it in 2015. Matthew has spent 5 years teaching high school mathematics in Manitoba schools and 10 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. In 2018, Matthew was named one of the top 7 drone visionaries in precision agriculture and among the top 50 in the world by the Commercial UAV News. In 2016, M3 Aerial Productions launched their UAV ground school training program, which has trained around 600 commercial UAV pilots across Canada to date. So please welcome Matthew Johnson here this morning.
Thank you. All right, this is going to be a bit of a rapid fire presentation. There's lots and lots going on right now in this industry. I'm going to give you just a quick background. Thank you very much for the introduction. Like you said, I've been running ground school training in Manitoba and across Canada since 2016. We've run 48 courses now, from Yellowknife to St. John's, Vancouver to Moncton, and we often run courses in Winnipeg. This is where we're based, and so, well, this is Brandon, but I'll run courses in Winnipeg usually every month or two, and so I've been deeply involved in this industry, totally immersed myself in it since 2015, and have been following all the changes as things have been developing, and it's developing rapidly. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. There are some major changes that are coming. If you didn't know, just a few days ago on January 9th, some new regulations were announced that will take effect in Canada for drone operations as of June 1st. So I'll touch on that near the end of the presentation. That's maybe one of the 5 changes. So first of all, just understanding what we're talking about. I mentioned drones in the title of this, but actually what they're called is RPAS now, officially in Canada, remotely piloted aircraft systems. So alternative names, we hear drone all the time. Unmanned air vehicle is another one. That's actually what is currently in place until June 1st, and then officially the terminology changes over. But everybody now is referring to it as RPAS in Canada. And in the States, they refer to them as unmanned aerial systems. So RPAS is a ICAO standard, International Civil Aviation Organization. They've got this standard terminology that hopefully all the countries that are part of ICAO will adopt in the next few years. To understand, to realize change, you have to first understand it. So what's happening right now in the industry, we've basically got all these different types of systems. There's multi-rotors and there's fixed wings. Why we're using drones is because they're so fast and efficient. If you want the data right now, there's no other better way to gather large area data now than with a drone. Unless you're talking about massive areas, then perhaps a plane or a helicopter or even satellites are good, but those take time and there's problems associated with each of them. Drones aren't perfect by any means, but they are a really good resource for gathering data quickly. We've got fixed wing systems, which are great for covering very large areas, more than a quarter section at a time. If you've just got a quarter section here and there that you want to manage, then using a multi-rotor is probably a good option. But fixed wings are great if you've got half a section to a full section or more, and you're dealing with very large areas, and you're maybe mapping 5,000 to 10,000 acres a year, then you'd probably be thinking about investing in one of these types of systems. Now, both of these are compliant, which is a terminology that's very important moving ahead about the regulations. I'll mention that a little bit later, but the Centera Phoenix was just added to the list of compliant systems in Canada, which means that you will be able to use this as an advanced operator. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Multi-rotor UAVs are very nimble. You can get into some tight places with these. You can get an overview of your crop from 400 feet up, and then you can come down to 4 feet above it. If you notice a problem, you can just hover right above it and get a sense of what the problem is. This is just with a regular camera. You don't need anything special. If you want to see sometimes you can't see all the problems with just regular color cameras, so you may need to look into a near-infrared sensor, which is what we use to image and get plant health information. So creating vegetation indices, we use a near-infrared sensor or a multispectral sensor. Those are an added cost. They're pretty expensive. Right there, the green system there, that's the DJI Phantom 4. You can get that for about $2,000 now. And for a near-infrared system, a little sensor that gets mounted onto the back of it, made by Centera, it's called the Centera single sensor, they cost more than the drone. So the sensor is about $3,000 for a whole package. It's not a small investment, but it's a worthwhile investment. It can result in some major savings. These are some of the applications that we're using them for. Elevation mapping is a really big one right now in Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Doing vegetation analysis, obviously that's a big one. And then infrastructure inspections, looking at your buildings. If you've got a thermal sensor that you can attach on there, you can see where if you've got barns, chicken barns and hog barns, that sort of thing, you got to keep them at a certain temperature, and you're pumping a lot of heat into there. You definitely don't want to have holes where you're just spewing out your dollars out the roof. So you can use a thermal sensor to inspect your buildings. And then, of course, livestock monitoring. There's lots of people now that are starting to use drones to track and herd their livestock. You can certainly, I've heard anyways, you can certainly train livestock to respond to the noise of the drone and the presence of the drone. At first, they're probably going to be spooked to it, so I wouldn't just assume that right off the bat you can use your drone to herd your cattle along, but over time I've heard of methods that have been used to do that. All right, jumping right into the massive changes, because there's 5 of them that we're going to talk about. First one, drone swarms. Okay, I don't know if there's a video on YouTube that you can find that shows the coming swarm of all these little drones that are dropped out of a large plane, and there's hundreds of thousands of them, and they're used for nefarious purposes. Well, that's just a made-up thing. But drone swarm technology is developing, and for drones for good, in terms of agriculture, drone swarms are going to have a major effect on how we are gathering data and how fast we're able to gather that data. So if we have one Phantom 4 professional and I'm out mapping 160 acres, the most efficient possible mapping that I'm going to get out of that, usually it takes around 4 batteries, 20 minutes per battery-ish, and so we're going to end up with approximately 80 minutes. Now, it's a high efficiency job, keeping your battery swaps to a very quick transition time. But if we have 2 drones working at the same time, now it's down to 40 minutes. 20 minutes with 4, 10 minutes with 8, 5 minutes with 16. If you've got 32 systems, you can map 160 acres in 2.5 minutes. So now all of a sudden, I don't necessarily have to charge $800 to go to someone's property and map 160 acres. We can cut down the cost substantially because we can increase the number of properties that we can do in a day. And likewise for a farming operation, if you've got 10,000 acres, having a swarm system is going to be able to really, really cut down on the time it takes for you to map. Now, I've got little Phantoms up here. Those probably are not going to be the system that you'd be using, paying $2,000 per system, because they're meant to fly for a really long time. If you're only using a drone that is flying for 2.5 minutes, it doesn't have to be 2 pounds with one of those pounds being comprised of the battery. So your battery can be only a few grams when you're only flying for a short period of time. And that cuts down on the size of the whole system. It cuts down on the size of the battery and the weight of the battery. So there's, and it cuts down on the time it takes to do your job. So that's a really big change that's coming, and they're here. Drone swarms are here. I don't know if you watch the opening ceremonies of the Olympics there, you can see up there the big surfer, or not surfer, the snowboarder. That was made of 1,500 little drones with lights on them that Intel has put together, controlled by one laptop, with one backup laptop in case something goes wrong with the main one. 1,500 drones controlled by one laptop. So that is a drone swarm in action. Disney has that exact swarm that they show in Orlando. I think every day or a couple times a day they've got a drone swarm show. China has beat the record, which was 1,500 at the Olympics. Now they've got 3,200 drones that are taking part in swarms. So obviously they're trying to one-up each other here. So how is this going to benefit me? We're going to have, what that will do is present cheaper options. So instead of having, like I said, having to pay $800 for one quarter section to be mapped, that's not going to happen. That's too much. And for our company, that's kind of, we can't justify going out and doing jobs. We're driving 2 hours to go and fly for somebody and only charging $200. It just doesn't work that way. But if we're able to cut down on the time so we can fill more space, then it certainly is going to be a cheaper option for everybody. Massive change number 2, drone spraying. You probably heard about this development as it's been coming along. Rogue Drone is kind of the trailblazer in this industry, in this part of the industry. In Canada, they were the first company to get certified by Transport Canada. They received an SFOC to spray crops with drones back in 2017. There was some issues that they ran into through the Pest Management Regulatory Agency. You're saying a drone is not an aircraft, it's not on the label, so you can't use a drone yet to spray. So there's some Health Canada, Industry Canada, Transport Canada, there's some jostling that's going on right now. Technically right now, drone spraying is not allowed. Things probably, especially after these new regulations change, we'll see where that goes. So there's certainly an opportunity there. Now, you're not necessarily going to be sending out a drone to spray 160 acres, because that would take a very long time and that's not efficient. But if you only have, in precision agriculture, the whole idea is to use data to manage small areas. And if you're going to map a field and be able to determine where the smaller areas that need to be micromanaged are, you can have a drone go out and you can potentially program it in and take care of those small areas. So we're going to eliminate waste. We're going to increase efficiency. Massive change number 3, fully automatic. All right, so there are systems right now that have been created and tested and released in certain countries where drones actually can just be fully automatic, where you put a box. Let's just give one of these 2 examples. Aerobotics and H3 Dynamics are kind of the leaders in that space. They're boxes that you could potentially put in your field, and this H3 Dynamics, it has solar panels on the top that gather power during the day. It's got a backup fuel cell to help charge if it's a cloudy day. It's got a weather station that analyzes whether it's safe to open the top up or not. The drone sits inside. If it determines that it's a safe weather condition, that it can do a mapping job, it would open up, drone would take off, it would map a predetermined route that you would have programmed in there, and map it, come back, land, close up, upload the data to the cloud, and fully autonomous. Farmer doesn't have to be part of that. Prisons don't have to be part of that. Airports, like all these types of things, all these sensitive infrastructure, I think this is definitely where part of the industry is going to be going, having fully automatic drones where you don't actually have to have a dedicated pilot sitting there watching the thing as it does an autonomous mapping mission. Right now it's not allowed. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, says no, you can't have fully autonomous drones. It's not allowed yet. These systems, Aerobotics is an Israeli company, and this, I believe, I can't remember where they're based, but this product has been out for a couple years. I've been talking about this for a couple years already. They've been testing it, they've been running it in other countries that do allow automatic systems. So as they get more data and more safety data, all of a sudden there's a safety case and a use case that says, hey, this system has never crashed, or this system crashes 0.00001% of the time that it's used, whereas the human-operated one is subject to human error, which when you integrate human error into the operation of these systems, then you start to get issues, crashes, that sort of thing. Oh, that didn't work the way it was supposed to. So, how is it going to benefit? Well, if you want daily data, right now you can get daily data from satellites, but it's a big pixel. It's not going to give you that micro data that maybe you want. We'll probably get to a point where satellite data is improving as well constantly. It's getting better and better. But so is the drone stuff. So drone technology is not staying static. Neither is satellite data. It's all improving. So as it stands right now, when we do get fully autonomous flights systems, I think that will be a very, very powerful tool. And it probably will be combined with another one of the massive changes that are coming. Next one on here is dedicated airspace, or UTM. It's referred to as unmanned traffic management. This is something that is being worked on and developed by some very, very large agencies. NASA, Federal Aviation Administration, Canadian Space Agency, NAV Canada, Transport Canada, they're all working collaboratively on this project to create basically a dedicated drone airspace, a low-level airspace where drones are allowed to operate freely and planes are not supposed to be in there. The reason for that is because otherwise it's very, very difficult to manage risk to manned aviation when you have unmanned aviation mixed in with it. Especially small systems that could potentially cause damage, but are also at the same time, very difficult to see. So ADS-B is automatic dependent surveillance broadcast. This is basically a little chip. It depends on the size of your drone, depends on the application of what you want to use it for, and they vary in size. You can see that's kind of the comparison. You got the penny next to them all, so they're pretty small. And these are little chips that can be built onto an aircraft that send out a ping to anybody who's listening, to any sensors that are able to detect that ping, which aircraft are usually equipped with. And every couple seconds, it'll send out information saying, this is my altitude, this is our heading, this is the speed that we're operating at, and that sort of thing. This is the type of aircraft that we are. And so planes will be able to detect that, and other drones will be able to detect that. But at the same time, the drone also has to be able to detect. It's called detect and avoid. It's a system that's being integrated now into the more high-end drones. You can actually get a DJI Matrice 210, which is a pretty high-level system, about $40,000 multi-rotor system that has ADS-B that can detect. It'll tell you, pops up on your screen, there's a plane within 5 kilometers of you. It's pretty cool. So it's your responsibility then, if you're the pilot, to move out of the way to lower, because obviously manned aviation has priority of the airspace. LAANC is low altitude authorization and notification capability. This is something that the States has implemented right now, and it makes flying your drone very, very easy to coordinate in the airspace. Basically, you just type in where you are, where your parameters of your operation is, and then it goes into a system where everybody can see. So increasing communication is a huge, huge valuable piece of this industry, that if drone operators are saying, hey, this is where I am, and people are actually able to see that, and it's either the drone sending out a signal or pre-programmed communication that you've put into a central system somewhere that other people can see, that will increase safety quite a bit. Right, so in Europe, they already have something similar to this. It's called U-Space, and it's only in a couple countries that are running testing, like Switzerland. There's I think 4 countries that have U-Space, certain areas that are dedicated to unmanned air vehicles, or RPAS. So CSAR is the joint undertaking in Europe that is dedicated to this right now, and then we have all these companies here, or all these other groups that are working on it in North America. In addition to all this onboard systems, there's also going to be ADS-B that's in space, low orbit satellites, called LEO, low Earth orbit. And basically it's the plan to have tons of these little things, kind of like what Planet Labs has to map, to give daily images of the Earth. NAV Canada and Ariane are working on this to help have a basically space-based radar that's looking down. Because right now, all the radar that we are using is up from the ground. And then we have radar here that's going up and radar over here that's going up. You end up with a little triangle of area that's not covered. And so if you have space-based radar that's looking down, all of a sudden the whole airspace is covered. That's huge. I know this is a little bit high level, but this is a big change because it's connected with the next big change in the industry. So it's going to enable the next generation of change, which is beyond visual line of sight. When this comes, everything's going to change. Okay, drones are going to, and this is being tested right now. Drones are going to be bigger, and they're going to be autonomous, and they're going to be flying around, mapping very, very large areas. So here we have a little diagram, the drone operator standing in the middle. They can see visual line of sight, VLOS. Then there's extended visual line of sight, which could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be 0.75 miles, but it's if you have a visual observer who can communicate with you, you can technically, under the new regulations, you'll be allowed to extend your operation beyond where the pilot can actually see, as long as you have somebody or some system that's able to scan the airspace and tell the pilot, okay, there's no planes around, you're good to go. Then beyond that, where nobody's watching, is called beyond visual line of sight. And so in order to fly beyond visual line of sight, a drone needs to be able to have that detect and avoid capability. So there's 4 companies last year that were given some funding to undergo some testing. So Drone Delivery Canada is one, Canadian UAVs, Canada Post, working with Indro Robotics and ING Robotic Aviation. They were all doing different types of testing, like Drone Delivery Canada, obviously they were working on a delivery program where they were flying back and forth to a First Nation community at Moose Cree First Nation. These guys are working, they had put this out in the news last year sometime, some hive formation of how they're going to have a drone delivery system. I don't know, I can't really picture how that is going to work, but if we think 5 years down the road, I definitely can see drones flying overhead regularly. You'll look up in the sky and you'll see drones flying around. It's not that far away, which is a little bit concerning. Obviously, you start thinking about Big Brother watching and all that kind of stuff, but how is this going to affect? It's going to affect all of us. There's going to be large systems, like I said, that are mapping tens of thousands of acres a day that can fly for 24 hours, 36 hours, 1 week, longer. There's already drones that are flying at stratospheric altitudes up at 120,000 feet that can fly for 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, and they're just very, very lightweight. So we'll have drones that are providing aerial surveillance, large area, real-time data. So you want the data now, the drone will be able to gather it. Taxis, drone taxis. I was just at a conference in Dubai. I went to Dubai in November. I was a keynote speaker at a conference out there. And Dubai has announced that in 2020, they're going to launch their drone taxi program. There's a company out of New York right now that has announced that they're going to have drone taxis operating in New York in 2019, this year. That's crazy. And obviously, I mentioned there the Northern Deliveries, that's Drone Delivery Canada, they're spearheading this initiative. They're breaking ground on this brand new territory of having drones deliver packages to, in this case, remote communities. All right, so here's probably what a lot of people are wondering about. This is a bonus. This isn't the 5. This is an extra one. The new Canadian regulations. There's a lot. I can't cover everything in only a couple minutes, but what I am going to talk about is kind of some of the major changes that are coming. So this is going to have a massive effect. They've been announced already, but they won't take effect until June 1st. And you can find them online if you just search. They're on the Transport Canada website there. Some things that you're going to have to know that are key points. Every drone is going to have to be registered. Every drone that weighs more than 250 grams and up to and including 25 kilograms. Anything beyond that, you'll need a special flight operations certificate, but anything that's between 250 and 25 kilograms, you'll have to register. So it costs $5 to register. I've got 13 drones, so you can do the math there. $5 is not an outrageous fee to register your system. In addition to that, you will also need to pass an exam. Everybody operating a drone in that weight category is going to need to pass one of two exams. One as a basic operator, and the other as an advanced operator. In order to register your drone, you're going to have to be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, have a corporation, or be a government entity, and you have to be at least 14 years. So they've dropped the age from 18 down to 14 as a basic operator. That's pretty significant. And actually, if you are supervised by somebody who has their drone license, which I'll talk about in the next slide, if you're a child being supervised by someone who has their certification, then the child can even be younger than 14. There's some really interesting dynamics in these new regulations. Then if you sell, destroy, lose, or retire your drone, you're going to have to let Transport Canada know within 7 days. All right, visual observer, something that was in place under the old regulations that said you could not fly your drone for a commercial purpose unless you had a visual observer. Well, just the terminology, recreational and commercial, that's gone as of June 1st. There's no, because it was a little subjective where you'd say, oh, well, I'm only using this on my farm to gather some imagery. I'm not selling it. It's not a commercial operation. Transport Canada said, yes, anytime you benefit from the data that you're collecting, it is a commercial operation. So there's this back and forth always, and so they said, we're getting rid of commercial and recreational. There's no difference between a hobbyist and a professional operation. It's all dependent on whether their proximity to people and their proximity to airports. So the nice thing about this is that now you'll be able to legally fly under a basic operations endorsement on your pilot certificate. You'll be able to fly and you'll be able to map your fields just by yourself, as long as you are operating in uncontrolled airspace, which probably most of you will be. Controlled airspace would be around Brandon, within 5 miles of Brandon Airport, around Southport Aerodrome, around Winnipeg Airport. There's only a few controlled airspaces in Manitoba. Okay, you're going to have operational procedures, and this kind of ties in the value of taking a little bit of training. So if you wanted to get the basic operator endorsement, the course content that you need to know is going to be quite a bit less than the advanced operator. Our course takes 16 hours of in-class training plus roughly 25 hours of online self-study material. The basic one is only going to be about 6 hours of online material and 2 hours of an online webinar, like a live webinar. So it's substantially less, like 40 hours versus 8 hours. And that will help you to be able to get operating procedures, which you have to have in place, and you have to have emergency procedures. You got to have a plan. That's the biggest thing. Transport Canada is so concerned about safety that they don't want people just buying a drone and flying it without thinking about what could actually go wrong. And things don't go wrong all the time, but things do go wrong, and you need to have a plan. You got to have something, understanding of what you're going to do in case something does go wrong. Okay, they're changing the safe distances. Instead of the 300-foot max that was what recreational operators were limited to in the past, now it's 400 feet above ground level for everybody. And you have to, if you're flying under the basic category, you have to be 100 feet away horizontally. So that doesn't mean if you're 400 feet over somebody, you're 100 feet away from them. You have to be 100 feet horizontally away from them at whatever altitude you're flying at. Unless you have an advanced operator endorsement, then you could actually get permission to fly over people, which is massive. That's a huge change to what Transport Canada has limited us to in the past. They're actually going to allow drones to fly over people, which connects to what I just said a few minutes ago about seeing drones flying over us. It's going to be a reality in the near future. Night flights are going to be allowed now. Before, they were not. It was actually quite difficult to get permission to fly at night. Now, even under the basic operators, they're going to be allowed to fly at night, as long as you've got position lights on your drone. Nobody's going to need insurance. You don't have to have insurance, although you definitely should have insurance. But Transport Canada is not saying that you have to have insurance anymore, because really the only industry that they say you have to have insurance is that automobile industry. So I would recommend between $1 million and $5 million of insurance, UAV liability insurance, which you can generally find that for between $300 and $500 annually. Especially if you're running a commercial operation, like if, I know we're getting away from that term, but if you are running a business, it's probably in your best interest to have insurance on this stuff. Okay, so here's kind of a breakdown of the basic operations and the advanced operations. Under the basic, like I mentioned, you have to have completed the exam, you have to be at least 14 years old, or, like the stars there, or have supervision. And you have to be operating in uncontrolled airspace, and you have to be 100 feet away from people. Under the advanced, you have to pass the advanced operation exam. You will have to have a flight review, so a practical assessment of your flying skills, and it's not so much of your flying skills, because it's not that difficult to fly a drone. Press up on the controller, it goes up, press left, it goes left. That was my right, actually. But if you want to fly over people and get your advanced certificate, you're going to have to pass this flight review. That's really testing that you follow procedures when you fly, that you have a checklist that you go through, that you communicate with your crew. It's a process that they want to see advanced operators are going through. Okay, you're going to have to be 16 years of age or older, or supervised. You will be allowed to fly in controlled airspace as long as you communicate with Nav Canada, and there's procedures that you'll have to learn how to do that. You will have to use, if you want to fly in controlled airspace under the advanced certificate, you're going to have to use a compliant UAV. So I don't have a list to show you of all of them, because there's about 40 or so on there. You can just search online on Transport Canada compliant drones. That could be costly, because right now there's not really very many options that are less than $15,000. So if you want to fly in advanced airspace, your DJI Mavic or your Phantom or whatever is not going to be, at this point, it's not allowed. The DJI is working on getting on that list, but they're not quite there yet. So those are some of the major regulatory changes. Like I said, for each of these categories, your training required, there is some level of training. Transport Canada wants to make sure that you have some training when you go out and fly, that you're not just buying a drone from Staples, an office supply store, and going out and flying your drone in a park that's 2 kilometers away from Winnipeg International Airport. You need to understand a little bit about air safety. You need to understand a little bit about the importance of having procedures and being able to read, take into consideration weather and all that stuff. So we do have a course coming up at Southport Aerospace Center on the 12th and 13th of February. That is our next course. I mentioned that we try to run courses around Winnipeg every month or two. This is the next one. We don't have another one scheduled in Winnipeg yet, but it'll probably be somewhere in April timeframe. We also run flight training, but that's so much more difficult to plan. We don't just pick a day because it's so weather dependent. And we have a conference coming up in Winnipeg called the Western Drone Show. Now this is a really big announcement. The Western Drone Show is going to bring education, people who are involved in education, whether you're teachers, principals, superintendents, bringing them face to face with people who are operating drones in the drone industry, not just operators, but also manufacturers and retailers and training outlets, basically trying to show the value and our future which this is the future. There's going to be drones that are going to be delivering packages and flying over us and monitoring and doing all this crazy stuff. And teachers generally have no idea. For the most part, I was a teacher, and in the schools that I taught in, when I was talking about drones, nobody knew or had a clue about what the implications of this are. So this is a really big, I saw a very important connection that needs to be made there. And at this conference, we will have a speaker from Centerra there who's going to be talking about the agricultural connections. We're going to have connections that are made with GIS. Dr. Dion Wiseman from Brandon University here. They're the first university in Canada to have a ground school program that was integrated with their advanced geomatics course, which was our ground school program. Right now, we're working with Frontier School Division in northern Manitoba, well, in remote Manitoba, up in Churchill, and there's schools actually all over Manitoba. Falcon Lake is in Frontier. They are launching a drone program, and they're really the first ones that are doing this. And so with them, we decided to plan this conference to get people to come in. So if you are interested in using drones, there's going to be a speaker, there's going to be Transport Canada and Nav Canada there. There's going to be an expert from the Beyond Visual Line of Sight side of things talking about that. There's going to be GIS speakers. There's going to be agricultural speakers. There's going to be lots of value provided at this conference, so I highly recommend that you look into that. If you want to reach out and if you have any questions I'll take a few questions now because I have a little bit of time, I think. Afterwards, I'll be up just outside the doors there to take questions, and you can also send email to info@m3aerial.com. And yeah, anybody have any questions now?
I think we should give Matt a good hand of applause first, please. And we have a record time of 10 minutes for questions.
Yes.
So how many of us, based on what we do in ag, would actually need an advanced operator?
So the question was, how many of you involved in agriculture are actually going to need an advanced operator certificate? Well, that depends on where you're planning on flying. So the 100-foot rule is probably not going to be a big issue to keep 100 feet away from people if you've just got a massive open expanse, but it's that airspace. So if you're flying around Southport Aerodrome, if you're flying around Winnipeg Aerodrome, if you're flying around Brandon, there's a few other select controlled airspaces in southern Manitoba, you can't fly there unless you've got an advanced certificate. So if you've got research stations that are within those areas, the only way to do it is to have the advanced operator endorsement on a pilot certificate. Yes?
Just a minute here. Just wondering, is Mr. Rob Sharkey in the audience here? That's our next speaker. Looking. Yes. Would you mind coming down so we can set up your presentation? And we'll keep taking questions.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So we know that people don't always comply with regulations. So what penalties are there for people who don't register their drone?
Right, that's a good question. So what penalties will there be in place for people that are not following the regulations? Transport Canada unleashed a huge list of fines that can be applied now. Instead of what they said before, it was maximum of $5,000 if you violated your SFOC, or if you didn't have an SFOC and you should have had one. For an individual, $5,000 up to $25,000 for a corporation. That's what it is currently and will be until June 1st. The new regulations, they've got like, if you didn't do this, if you didn't do this, if you didn't do this, they've literally 2 pages of fines that they can file that start at $1,000 each. So if it's hard to track people, and Transport Canada doesn't have a lot of resources for enforcement, but if people report and it's an issue that is brought up multiple times, then it might be something that they kind of try and crack down on specific individuals. Yeah?
So with the basic, it's my understanding that you can fly anything. You can fly something big in your garage, or you can fly the 367.
Yeah, so
Why would that then compliancy that's so small for the advanced? It's like if you've got Phantom or a Mavic or
I don't think they're going to reduce any. I don't think Transport Canada is going to be reducing anything now that they've put these out. I don't think they plan on changing for a while. DJI and Transport Canada were kind of butting heads for a while. DJI actually had a campaign running that said that the compliancy rules that Transport Canada was going to be pushing out were against the general good of the industry, and so they were really going up against them for quite a while. Now that Transport Canada has officially pushed the rules out, DJI has said, well, we'll see about getting on the list now. They never even tried before, so nobody really knows what exactly DJI is going to do on this. I would suspect, and by the sounds of it, they're going to try and get their Matrice 210 on the list. They may get their Inspire 2 on the list. I could see maybe one other system, the new Mavic 2 Enterprise, might be on the list. They've indicated that they're going to try and get their Enterprise drones on the list. I doubt that they'll get the Phantom 4 on because they've got the Phantom 5 coming out fairly soon, and so they're probably going to be pushing away the Phantom 4 fairly shortly anyways, so I'm guessing they're not going to try and get that on the list. But yeah, that was a bit of a complex, those many questions tied into one. The basic operator is kind of a funny situation I'll just finish up with this. A 14-year-old kid can be flying a 24-kilogram drone over a highway now, not insured, at nighttime, compared to a professional company who has a DJI Phantom 4 Pro operating in an area that's blocked off in controlled airspace, who are not allowed to fly anymore. It's kind of a weird loophole that it has presented itself that Transport Canada might be kind of trying to swallow the lump now. But
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we have 3 or 4 minutes left, yes.
Yeah, so just from what I understood, maybe I misunderstood, the differentiation between the advanced or the commercialized training required is kind of your reference to the aircraft. So it's beyond visual line of sight. Is that in the category of the
if you're flying beyond visual line of sight, you're going to have to get a special flight operations certificate. That's not within the advanced operator. Anything that's like beyond regular type operations, if you want to fly higher than 400 feet, or if you want to fly beyond visual line of sight, or if you want to carry some kind of chemical or something, or explosive for whatever reason, you would have to be under an SFOC. It wouldn't be.
So in the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about drones and having very large sections of land, and so basically under the regulations that you were talking about, if that's within 0.75 miles, then you're fine. But outside of that range, you're beyond, you're extending the line of sight.
Yeah, so if you want to map a quarter section, you'll be able to do that under visual line of sight. If you want to do a half section, if you stand at the midway point, you can pretty much be within visual line of sight on most. Depends on the size of the aircraft. If you're using a Mavic, well, they start to disappear after like 800 feet. If you're using a Phantom, well, you can get up to 1,500 feet with those. If you're using an Inspire, they're bigger and you can see them further away. So it's hard to say exactly. It really depends on the drone that you're using, but ultimately, if you wanted to do a full section and you're using like a fixed wing, you could put a visual observer on the other side of the field and then just make sure they've got communications with you, and then you're able to do a full section.
There's not lots of provision for any kind of fully autonomous mapping that you would fix wing, for instance.
Yeah, right now, fully autonomous. You mean, I'm not sure what you meant by that.
So like it would be without line of sight and without operator feedback, like beyond visual.
Yeah, you would for beyond visual line of sight without operator feedback, you would have to have a special flight operations certificate, which is not saying that it's not possible, but you would need a very, very powerful system, very expensive system, and you'd have to work back and forth with Transport Canada to get approved for that type of operation. But Usually Transport Canada will work with companies if they want to do that kind of stuff. One thing I didn't mention about the regs is that drone swarms are actually going to be allowed now under the Advanced Operator Certificate up to 5 systems controlled by one pilot, as long as they're meant to be controlled by one ground station.
I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you for the questions and for attending this morning. Let's give Matt a good hand of applause again. And on behalf of Manitoba Ag Days, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on, and once we're set up here with our next speaker.
Thanks. I watched your video this morning.
If people have more questions of Matt, I know there was quite a bit going on. You might want to meet with Matt upstairs, if that's okay with you. If people want to meet maybe outside the venue so you can have more discussion directly with Matt himself.